Hey guys, thanks for joining me. This is Angie at Sew Chicken Scratch, and today I'm sharing with you how to make a Santa sack using 4 pieces of fabric. So here's what you'll need: 2 patterns of fabric that coordinate, some matching thread, and your basic sewing supplies. You can find the complete list of supplies in my free PDF or below this video. So to get started, you're going to press your fabric. And then step 2 is you're going to cut your fabric to measure 24 inches by 30 inches. And you're going to do this on all 4 pieces of fabric. So now we're ready to make the Santa sack. Okay, so here's our fabric to make our Santa sack. We've got 2 pieces of the outside fabric that measure 24 by 30. And then we've got 2 lining fabrics that measure 24 by 30. The first step after cutting your fabric is we are going to take the outside fabric and we need to piece them together to make one really big piece. So I'm going to turn this and place them right sides together, and we're going to sew it on the 24-inch side, okay? So this is the 24-inch side, right sides facing together. I'm going to clip it and then sew across the whole thing, making one really large piece of fabric. Okay, I'm not going to film this process because I'm just stitching right along there. I'll be right back. Okay, so I've just gotten back from the sewing machine and I've stitched our 2 pieces together. Now what you're going to do is open this up, and we're going to take the lining fabric. And I know probably this whole thing cannot be seen in the camera, but I will turn it in just a second and show you that. So I'm placing the inside of our Santa sack, right sides facing together. Now I'm going to turn this so you can see it. So we're going to pin this, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go and stitch straight across. So same thing, I'm going to clip it really quickly, and then we're going to go sew it. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, okay? So we're just sewing the lining fabric to the front fabric. So I'm just going to switch this around and get the other side and line up the other lining. So I was looking for a really cool way to wrap a big gift for my granddaughter, and I could not find a gift bag big enough. And so I came up with this idea to hold a really large gift. And then I actually had a couple followers request that I do a Santa sack. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the perfect name for it. Okay, so I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch straight across. One other tip that I would like to give you is before you sew the lining fabric onto your front fabric or outside fabric, clip it a couple times on the sides so that it doesn't shift. I think I've shared that before, is that I like to clip the side just so that when I'm sewing, it doesn't get pulled. You don't have to do this step, but I like keeping it all straight. Okay, so we are sewing with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, we've just sewn the lining fabric to the front fabric. And now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and add our label. If you don't have a label, then you can skip this step, okay? I'm just going to place it right over here on the side. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm thinking this year I need to probably order some new labels. I've had the same label now for about 3 years. Okay, so I'm going to clip it first, and then I'm going to pin it. Okay, so there's that. Now, you're going to place the right sides together, and we are going to pin and sew, or clip and sew. And I cannot get all of this in the camera, so I'm going to do the best I can to explain this. Okay, so this is the lining fabric, and I've got both ends together. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to clip it to hold it together on both ends. So the left and the right. Then here in the middle, I want to leave an opening so that we can turn this right side out. So there's the first pin, and then here's the second pin. So we're going to stitch straight across, except leaving an opening there. So technically we're going to start here, end here, pick up here, go to here. Again, we're sewing with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so to recap what we just did, we stitched along here and left an opening so that we could turn this right sides out. So now what we need to do is stitch along the left and the right. And we also need to leave an opening for our drawstring. Okay, so I'm starting on the front fabric, and what I'm going to do is just clip. Now, we need to add our opening for the drawstring. I want to make sure that these sides line up. When you're dealing with a piece this large, things can shift really easily. So I'm just going to kind of roll this up, and then right here, because this is the outside of our bag, our sack, I'm going to use, on my earlier bag, I used 3 inches, but this one is a little bit larger. So I'm going to mark 3.5 inches, and the 3.5 is on that stitch line, okay? So 3.5 inches, and then I'm going to move over 1 inch. You can do 3/4 if you want. And then I'm also going to pin that. So I'm gonna, well, let me show you. Get my pins here. So when I'm sewing the sides, I'm going to make sure that I don't sew in between these 2 pins, okay? Now I gotta continue going down the side because we're gonna stitch across the whole thing. This is like a train, isn't it? And we still have to do the other side, so I'll probably fast forward this. Okay, so now we're on to the other side. So I'm going to start here at the end and clip. I'm trying to keep this fabric straight and also stay in the camera view. Okay, now, so here's where we need to mark it for our opening. So I'm going to make sure these line up. I'm going to clip this for a second and clip it again. Now, same thing, I'm going to mark this at the 3.5 inch. So I'm going to move this aside for a minute. And that, I'm lining up the 3.5 inches with the stitch line. And then 1 inch. So the same thing as the other side. I'm going to place these pins because I want to make sure that I don't sew in that space between the 2 of them. Okay? Now we just have to continue pinning until we get to the end of this, and then we're going to go sew all of it. Okay, so I'm going to see you over at the sewing machine. Again, we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so remember to stop at this pin. Okay, so now we have to do the other side. Okay, remember to stop on this line, back stitch, and then start sewing again on the next line. Okay, so we have just sewn the whole sides together. And now before we go any further, we want to find that label and we want to make sure that we caught it. And I'm going to tell you, more often than not, I actually poke myself finding that label. So I'm just going to hold on to it right here. I can feel that pin, and then I'm going to try to not stick myself with that thing. And I got it. Okay, so the label's good, somewhat. The next step is we want to box the corners, okay? So I'm going to roll this out flat, or flatten it, not roll it, but flatten it, just so it's a little bit easier to work with, because we're going to box the corners on the lining fabric and the front fabric, okay? So let's start with the front or the outside fabric. What I'm going to do is position it just like this, okay? Hopefully you can see this. So that's how it looks, okay? Now I want to get it so that it's flat on my surface. Okay, so here is my ruler. I'm going to take this line here, this white line, 45 degrees. I'm going to line it up to the side here. I'm going to use 4 inches on this side. So line up that white line with the edge, and then I want to slide it up until this 4 inches hits the edge of my fabric there. And I can see, and you know what? I need to bring this closer to me so I can't see all the way up there. There we go. 4 inches on the white line. And this does not have to be exact. This is a sack. It's a very forgiving project. So this is where we're going to sew, okay? So I'm just going to take a couple pins. Oh, that's a shorty. There's that one. And you know, I want to clip it also. There we go. Now we need to do the other side, and then we also need to do the lining fabric. So I want to keep this somewhat straight. Okay, so there's the side that we just marked, okay? So now here's the side opposite of it. I want to make sure this piece right here is going to the right. So I want to make sure that the other side is also going to the right, okay? And again, if you don't, it's not the end of the world, but it makes things nicer if you do. Okay, so again, I'm going to line this up with that 45-degree line, 4 inches over on the left, and the white line on the right. This is going to give us a pretty big bottom. It might be too big. I used 3 inches on my previous one, but it'll be okay. Whatever we use is going to be fine. Now we've got to do the lining fabric. So the exact same thing. Okay. So now, let me fold that down. Okay, 4 inches. And I'm going to pin it and clip it. We're almost done, so now we just need to flip this over, and we want to fold that back, and we want to do this side. I wish I had another camera going so that y'all could see how big this piece is. If you make one this size, share a picture with me. I'd love to see it. Okay, we're going to take this over to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch straight across on all 4 corners. Once again, we're going to be sewing with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so now that we've sewn across that line, we can go ahead and remove the corners, and you can just take your scissors and cut straight across. Now we're also going to iron off that mark because I'm not going to press this later because it's a sack. So normally I press these later and that removes it, but like I said, I'm not going to press this. So I want to go ahead and get those purple lines off of my fabric. So just cutting away these corners, about a 1/2 inch away from the stitch line. And then one more. Okay, these are trash. So I'm going to put my wool mat here and just iron out these lines. There's that one. It goes pretty quickly. And if you'll remember, we also have lines where we made the opening for the drawstring bag. So we're going to press those too. So the next step, after we've ironed out our purple lines, we are going to pull this entire sack through the opening. We could have made that bottom even bigger. See? Yeah, I'm glad I went with the 4 inches. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to close the opening down here in the liner, okay? So before you do that, make sure you push out your corners. And if you want to make this have a bigger bottom, go with 5 inches instead of 4. I went from a 3 inch to a 4 inch, and now I probably could have gone with a 5 inch. And let's see, let me turn this way so that I can get a good hold on this. Now, I will tell you, we need to get the iron back out because this fabric, it would do so much better if we pressed it. You don't have to do this step, but I want to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, here's the bottom of the lining. I'm going to fold that over and press it just slightly. And now this one. I never do this. but I was having trouble getting this to line up, and I feel like if I press it, then that's going to make it a lot easier to sew that closed. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to clip it or pin it, and then we're going to go sew straight across there. Now you have two options. You can actually start all the way down here and stitch all the way here, or you can just stitch just the opening. I'm okay just stitching the opening, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to pin where I want to stop sewing, and I'm going to pin where I'm going to start sewing. So this is my start and this is my stop. And then I'm going to clip a couple times in between here, because this is a very large piece of fabric. So I'm not going to film this because all I'm doing is sewing straight across from here to here, and that's it. So I'll be right back. Okay, so you can see that I just closed the bottom of the lining fabric. And now what we want to do is place the lining fabric inside. There's just no graceful way to do this because it's so large. There's just no graceful way to do it. Okay, so here is how big it is. You probably can't see the whole thing, but what I want to do now is press the top of this up here so that the lining fabric doesn't peek out from the front fabric. Okay, so I'm going to place my ironing board here, and I'm just going to fold this down and take this super hot little iron that I have and go straight across. And I'm going to do both sides. So now what we need to do is we need to figure out where we're going to be sewing so that we can bring our drawstring through here, okay? So right here is our opening for the drawstring. So that comes down, let's see, let me turn it the right direction. So that's at the edge. So you can see that my opening is at 3.5 inches. So I want to sew at 3.5 inches and 4.5 inches over on my sewing machine. So we're going to take this over there and we're going to stitch across the entire thing at 3.5 and 4.5. Luckily this ruler goes all the way across, and so that is 3.5 inches. Let's see, hold on. That's 3.5 inches right there, okay? So take whatever marking pen you want. I know these come out because I've used them for a long time. So I'm going to draw straight across. I know it's a little terrifying because what if the ink doesn't come out? But you just saw it come out just a couple minutes ago. So I'm going straight across at 3.5 inches. I'm coming down 1 inch from the last mark, okay? So we have to do this exact same thing on the back side. So 3.5 inches from the top. So there is the 3.5 and the 3.5. Okay, again, I'm coming down 1 inch from that line, and then we will be done with this. Okay, I'm going to see you over at the sewing machine where we're just going to stitch on those lines. Okay, for this step, I'm going to remove this plate. I'm going to start in the seam, and I'm going to be stitching right on that line. I wanted to point out one thing too, because a lot of times we use the right side of our machine to line this up, and as you can see, I do have room, but it's pretty far over there, so I'm just following this line that I drew with my ruler. Okay, so now I'm going to move this down an inch, and we're going to sew on this line. Okay, so as you can see, we have just stitched straight across, and we need to press those purple lines out. Aren't you happy to see that it works? Okay, so after you've pressed all those purple lines off, you also want to snip these threads on the inside. We are ready to add the drawstring. Okay, so I've got 2 pieces of twill tape. That's what I like to use for my drawstring, and I will make sure that the measurement is on the screen for this, because I have made this Santa sack a little bit larger than my original one, and I want to make sure that I give you the right measurements. Okay, so I'm using a bodkin, and I hope that's how you pronounce it. You can use a safety pin, and I'm going to thread this through. And I will probably fast forward this because it's going to take a few minutes. And I will warn you that be careful, because more often than not, I didn't attach the bodkin well enough, and I've had to start over. Okay, there is the end of it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and tie those 2 ends together, because you certainly don't want to have to start over, right? So I'm just going to knot it. So we came out the same side we went in. So let me open this up. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Let me pull this. Okay, so there's that side. Now we need to do the same thing on this side. So we're going to get this other piece. Okay, so I was having difficulty. I kind of missed my mark on this side. The hole is there, but I almost missed it. So just going to warn you not to do that. Okay, so now I have both ends, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to knot it at the end. I feel like most of this video was me struggling with the fabric. It's going to be worth it though. Okay, so now let's check this thing out. This is huge. So let me tell you the size of it. So here's the seam. So it is about 26 inches tall. So, yeah, well, approximately like 22. It's really large. So I'm going to pull the drawstring, and it's flat because it doesn't have anything in it. So I'm going to take a couple minutes. I'm going to put some tissue paper in, and I will show you what it looks like poofy. So here's both of my Santa sacks. I couldn't fit them on my table to show you, so I'm sharing the picture from my window. The smaller one was my prototype, and that's the one on the left, and we just made the larger one on the right. Don't you just love them? Okay, so that wraps up this project. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks a lot and have a great day.